The Supreme Court on Friday blocked President Trump from moving forward with deportations under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act for a group of immigrants in northern Texas, siding with Venezuelans who feared they were poised for imminent removal under the sweeping wartime authority. The decision is a significant loss for Trump, who wants to use the law to speed deportations and avoid the kind of review normally required before removing people from the country. But the decision is also temporary, and the underlying legal fight over the president's invocation will continue in multiple federal courts across the country. The justices sent the case at issue back to an appeals court to decide the underlying questions in the case, including whether the president's move is legal, and if it is, how much notice the migrants targeted under the act should receive. Two of the conservative justices, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, publicly noted their dissent. The court's decision was direct about how the government was attempting to handle the removals and also how U.S. District Judge James Hendricks had dealt with the case at an earlier stage. The court referenced another case that had reached it previously, that of a Maryland man, Kilmar Garcia, who was mistakenly removed to El Salvador. The court noted that the Trump administration has represented that it is unable to provide for the return of an individual deported in error to a prison in El Salvador. Given that, the court said the detainees' interests at stake are accordingly particularly weighty. In other words, the court was saying it is important to get the legal questions correct before people are removed, potentially forever, from the country. The court added that how the Trump administration was handling the removal of people from the country did not pass muster. Specifically, the justices pointed to notice of only 24 hours that was devoid of information about how to exercise due process rights to contest the removal by the immigrants. The Supreme Court sent the case back to New Orleans, the Fifth Circuit-based Court of Appeals, for further review, saying in its order that the appeals court erred in its dismissing of the detainees' appeal. Today's ruling effectively extends the temporary freeze that the justices put on Alien Enemies Act removals from the Northern District of Texas back on April 19th, said Steve Vladek, Supreme Court analyst and professor at Georgetown Law. Because lower courts have blocked use of the act in every other district in which the president has sought to invoke it, that means it's effectively pausing all removals under the act until the Fifth Circuit, and presumably the Supreme Court itself, conclusively resolves whether they are legal and how much process is due, if so. The court also appeared to criticize how Hendricks, whom Trump nominated to the bench in his first term, had handled the case. Hendricks declined to halt the removals and argued, in his opinion, that the ACLU was attempting to rush the district court to act. Here, the district court's inaction, not for 42 minutes, but for 14 hours and 28 minutes, had the practical effect of refusing an injunction to detainees facing an imminent threat of severe irreparable harm, the court wrote. Alito, in a 14-page dissent joined by Thomas, said that the High Court had wrongly intervened at this time and sharply criticized it for telling the appeals court how to handle the case before it was fully handled by the district court. The court, he wrote, has blazed a new trail. It has plucked the case from a district court and decided important issues in the first instance. To my eyes, that looks far too much like an expansion of our original jurisdiction. Alito had initially dissented when the court first issued interim relief to the migrants last month. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, in a brief concurrence, said he agreed with the court's decision, but would have taken up the case in full now. The circumstances call for a prompt and final resolution, which likely can be provided only by this court, he wrote. Rather, consistent with the executive branch's request for expedition, and as the detainees themselves urge, I would grant certiorari, order prompt briefing, and hold oral argument soon thereafter, and then resolve the legal issues. The comments from Kavanaugh come a day after the High Court grappled with whether it should consider the merits of another one of Trump's controversial immigration policies, his bid to end birthright citizenship. That only had landed before it on an emergency basis. The Justice Department did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Trump claimed in a social media post on Friday that the Supreme Court, quote unquote, won't allow us to get criminals out of our country after the Supreme Court's decision.